Well, we're gonna go a little country this week. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Cory.
And this week, after our coverage of Beyonce's Cowboy Carter, we've decided to dive into one of the country legends featured on the album, this being the relatively obscure Linda Martell. Most people hadn't heard of her until the release of Cowboy Carter, ourselves included, but our curiosity was piqued. So we are covering her only album she ever released back in 1970, Color Me Country, kind of named after the big hit single from the album.
I mean, it had to be for me, but I feel like for both of us, because as far as the three legends that were on the Beyonce album, this is the only legend that I wasn't familiar with. But I
Yeah,
knew she was important enough for Beyonce to say, hey, this is where it came from for me, or this is one of the founding mothers of Black country, especially Black female country. So we had to dive into it.
yeah, it's something very new for us. So, and we don't usually do country music on this album, but the time was ripe to do this, and I'm glad we did it. It's a very interesting and somewhat tragic story, actually, even though Linda Martell has gotten some of her flowers in recent years, fortunately, but there was a lot of hardship before that.
Yeah, I know I'll say this a bunch of times, but if anything coming out of this album, these names, we said it last week, but all these new names are out there. Country's cool, or at least on the talking points right now. It's water cooler speak, so it's cool to see. I found a couple cool artists going down the path with Miss Linda Martell this week.
I didn't into other artists as much, but it's a really important story, I think, that surrounds this album, and I'm glad that we're here to cover it. So, but of course, we have to get into the background of this. This is where all that tea is for the most part on this one. So, before she ever sang country, Linda Martell, whose real name is Thelma Bynum, she was originally an R&B singer. She was part of a group called the Anglos, and she had some limited success with them and as a solo performer. But one day, a man named William Duke Rayner saw her perform in South Carolina, heard her do a couple of country covers, and he offered to pay for a demo tape for her. And she kind of brushed it off. She was like, no, no, this isn't it. But she ended up going for it. And Rayner introduced her to Shelby Singleton in 1969. That A&R guy and producer. He had signed Roger Miller and produced records for artists like George Jones, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Dinah Washington, all big names up to this point. So clearly, Rayner saw something special with Linda Martell and her singing. And she met with Singleton, and he suggested she sing country, and she was surprised by that at first, but she went along with it. And label, and yeah, she signed in May of 1969 and was very quickly put to work.
Very quickly. I mean, oof. When we get into how it got recorded, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, so yeah, her first single was Colored days after she was signed. That was a cover of Color Him Father. And she was quickly put out to do shows and perform. She became the first Black woman to perform at the Grand Ole Opry in 1969, and first Black woman to have a hit on country radio that same year. But there's always a bit more to the story. So, when she signed with Shelby Singleton, she was not signed to his main label. He had a separate country label with the, to put it lightly, unfortunate name Plantation Records. Now, Linda Martell did not like that name and she called him on it, but he said it was not with a racist intent. But because she was under contract, she didn't have much of a choice but to record under Plantation Records.
I mean,
Man.
in those years, it really could be a homage to not we don't even have to be talking about cotton plantations here, just the sheer fact of the farming industry inside of America and how much of our roots are inside of that. So I try to keep a silver lining playbook here. Of course, it is very unfortunate looking back and being like, wow, man. But I try to keep a silver on
You're
this.
you're being way too generous, I think. This was over 100 years after the Civil War ended, and it was called Plantation Records. Seriously?
Yeah, maybe I am giving a little bit too
I,
much there.
yeah,
That's a good
I
point.
think you are. That's just there's no other way for me to say it other than that is just messed up, and that's putting it lightly. You don't make that. You have to consider the connotations of a name like that. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. Performances did not always go well. She had slurs hurled at her throughout this promotional cycle. Um, a producer on the TV show Hee Haw even told her how to pronounce her words when she was singing, and she refused to do it, but she knew that that was racist and that it was definitely a microaggression, to put it lightly. Those my words, not hers, but just a really hostile atmosphere at times, and management did have to be picky about where she was playing, but there were people who responded to her singles. She had free singles chart before this album was released in August of 1970, but it was recorded the year prior in one 12-hour session, which definitely speaks to the assembly line mentality of some record labels at this time. And that is one thing that it's good that they don't do that as much anymore, because that's just too quick. That's too much. I don't
Yeah, man.
like that.
1 hour, 11 tracks, front to back done. That's pretty wild. I don't know if that is production inside of that, but straight up recorded and the 12-hour stretch is put it's I mean, that's tough. Your live band, you're in one room, but still, regardless, that
Yeah.
is a feat to say the least.
And these musicians who played that were professionals, they were used to doing this. For Martell, this was all a bit of a change. She was used to being a wife and mom, so this was all very new to her. But she did gain some traction. There were people who responded nicely to her. They liked her personality in TV appearances. There were people who liked the songs. But even before the album was released in August of 1970, everything pretty much ended for Linda Martell. This is so crazy. So her manager sued her in May of 1970 for failing to pay him commission. And this case pretty much got dismissed by Shelby Singleton. However, he chose to focus on her label mate, Jeannie C. Riley, a white woman, instead of her, because she was the label's biggest act. She had a #1 hit with Harper Valley PTA. So she was going to get promoted instead of Linda Martell. And with that, Linda decided after a year at Plantation Records that she was going to leave. And she went to another label. It's not known which one. But even though she was allowed to do it under contract, Singleton was powerful enough to blackball her by threatening to sue the other record label. And they dropped her, and Linda Martell never recorded again. And this was all before Color Me Country was released in 1970, in August of 1970.
It's so mind blowing. It's so crazy. It's so exploitative. It's just it's it's mind blowing. I'm sorry. I mean, we're talking in less than a year. You come from being an R&B singer to being, I'll use the word coerced into recording a country demo, one single album, sued, dropped, blackballed. It's sad at the very least, but it is crazy in a year.
Yeah. all in one year. That's what makes the whole thing even more mind blowing and frankly tragic. I'll say this is tragic that she was blackballed, and afterwards she just, you know, her name disappeared with time. She had to work a variety of musical odd jobs in the years after. You know, you're singing on cruise ships and in cover bands. She even ran a record store. And by the 1990s, she went to work in South Carolina as a school bus driver and a teacher. And honorable professions. Bravo to her for doing that. She did it until her retirement in 2004. But there were people, nobody knew who she was. She went by her real name, and it took people time to put together two and two. Like they heard her on the CD. It's like, wait, that's Miss Thelma who drives the bus. She's Linda Martell. Yes. Yes, she is.
So crazy too, because I couldn't really find it, but was she ever even like a cult phenomenon or like, like
No.
a so I've been asking myself this question all week as I look to why for Beyonce that this was an integral piece, other than the obvious champion for really almost a mirror. And this is where for me it's sad coming in because look, Beyonce didn't get blackballed by any means, but the amount of, to put it nicely, polarizing viewpoints that came to the top of the muck right away is the same thing that was going on here. I wonder why outside of that she chose her. I wonder if she was a musical inspiration for her in like maybe an old 45 sitting around. It's a it's a wild choice with Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson.
I'm not under the impression that Beyonce was familiar with Linda Martell's music before her research into country because in the Rolling Stone article done about Linda Martell in 2020 and how she was country music's lost pioneer, modern black country singers didn't know who she was. They
Right.
had to research her and find out.
That's what I thought.
So she was pretty much lost to time, and you had to go out of your way to find out who she was. And I don't doubt that Beyonce was influenced by her as an originator when she went into this foray for Cowboy Carter.
Yeah.
But it is mind blowing that no, Beyonce has not been blackballed. However, the response to this album amongst the traditional country listeners has been really polarizing. And it's a look at how things have changed and things have stayed the same since 1970.
Yeah, that's the sadness I'm talking about. It's crazy to see, man. Crazy to see. I know we talked a lot last week about how my mind, but our minds were blown by it in this day and age. It's wild to see it in full form um inside of a tragedy here. There could have been another record. She has a beautiful voice.
Yeah, there could, and that is what makes it so sad because what could have happened? Like, what
Yeah.
could she have done if she weren't blackballed? If she that there and there's a lot. I mean, and I feel like this question made us very curious to analyze her one and only album, Color Me Country. It's
Yeah,
like,
man.
what was here? What could have been possibly? It's interesting to think of where we could have gone from here. But this is what we have. And fortunately, in recent years, Martell has gotten some recognition even before this Beyonce album. She did get a Rolling Stone article. She got a tribute at an awards show for being a pioneer. And notably, she's one of the survivors. So many of her peers are gone at this point, and Linda Martell is still alive at 82 and got to participate in this 2024 album. And she's lived to tell her this story. And not everybody did survive in Nashville.
That's true. That's super cool.
So yeah, I'm definitely grateful that she's gotten to tell her story and that she's getting recognition while she's still here, because too often it's artists get their due posthumously and they weren't here to see it. And I'm glad Linda's getting some flowers. But with all of this, what of the music? That's what we want to know. And with that being said, we're ready to dive into Linda Martell's one and only album, Color Me Country. Um,
Let's let's get at it.
all right, so yeah. So the album begins with Bad Case of the Blues. This was written by Margaret Lewis and Myra Smith, who wrote over half the songs on the album. If it wasn't written by them, I'll mention that. But other than that, assume the songs were written by them, if I don't say the writer's name. So this obviously has a bit of a honky tonk sound, kind of given away in the title, Bad Case of the Blues. And it's got some yodeling, which I think does make her sound the singer. It's like, okay, she can do this. She's got a beautiful voice and she has this in her. That's great. This was the third of the free singles that came out pre-album, and it charted at 58 on the country charts. I think this is a short and sweet opener. I like the bluesy feel of it. I like the yodeling. It's a cool little track.
Yeah, man. I was surprised to see yodeling here, especially on the opener. I like it. It's a cool little intro into what we're gonna get. We get right off the bat an old classic country song. You know, you've got your protagonist and their tale, usually a sad one. This one, by title, you already know that it's a bad case of the blues. And you know, a gambling man would say most countries about love too. So we get what I was expecting coming in here. But I get a sound from her voice that doesn't strike me in the listening ear as a black voice. So when I read stuff about like what happened on Hee Haw and whatnot, it makes me even more mad. But then I have to think like, man, in a down south bar, and I'm not shooting any shots here. I'm just saying, in a situation where there's racism present, this hits the jukebox in a bar. I say 98%, maybe 100% don't realize and enjoy. So it pisses me off. I'm sorry. These are the thoughts I have going through this one, and it's like, man, it's such a great voice here. It's mind blowing. I guess it shouldn't be. Now I keep saying I maybe I'm too naive inside of this, but just the devil's advocate of thinking like, man, music is music. That's why we do this podcast, you know?
It is why we do this podcast. But yes, she did have to have people tell her, well, you sound white and you gotta fix your phrasing. It's like just let her sing. She's got
Yeah.
a beautiful voice. Let her do her thing. But I do think this is one of those songs where she shows it, and I feel like we get an idea of who this singer is, this is as a stylist. And we're going to continue on now with our next song, which is San Francisco is a Lonely Town. This was written by Ben Peters, who also makes a few appearances on the album. He was the first to record it, and it tells the story of a couple taking a Greyhound to San Francisco. And the author Alice Randall pointed out that, quote, Martell's performance captures a bit of San Francisco few have seen. The kids who arrived not in beat up Volkswagens, but on the bus. The kids who weren't white, who were brown. The kids who came not from eastern cities, but from southern towns. Linda Martell portrays just such a girl woman convincingly. And that sums this up for me. We do get a different interpretation in this song and the different perspective, and her voice soars on this one. Again, she's really showing off her range here, and she sells the song. This is definitely an early highlight for Bay.
Yeah, that's my early notes is the vocal acrobat that we get here. Yeah, we got to hear a yodeler. We know that you can hit a quick pitch, but to hear the range that she does here is really awesome. She captures that sadness of the narrative super well through her singing. And it really is an early highlight. It's a gem on this album.
Yeah, not much else to say other than go listen to it. But
Yeah.
uh, I do think the next song is pretty interesting, though, from a sociological standpoint as well. This is The Wedding Cake. This was first recorded by Connie Francis, and Rolling Stone pointed out that this tune actually tapped into Martell's marital struggles at the time,
Mm.
which I think you can kind of hear in her voice. And it's simply a song about how marriage is not a fairy tale. The wedding cake is not all it's cracked up to be. It's not just this tasty dessert. There's more going on there. And it's very interesting to me how this song does fit into a certain tradition of country songs of this era, that a lot has been written about certain tunes from Martell's White Tears. The first song that comes to my mind is Tammy Wynette's Stand By Your Man, very famous song. A lot's been said about it, but it's actually a bit more, it's not quite as traditional housewife as you might think based on the title. But same can be said of other peers. And I feel like it's neat how this song fits into that tradition. Um, and I think it's cool to hear Martell do a song in that vein. It's at once, in a way, there is obviously. Oh, where am I going here? I mean, I do feel like it shows like this may be a black woman, but she can do this kind of song just as well as a white woman can. It kind of makes that kind of point. I don't know if she picked the song or not. I'm guessing that she didn't, but she sings it well. That's my main point, and fits into a nice tradition.
Yeah, the tradition, you have me there. I thought you got both of my notes or two of a couple of my notes on this. The tradition for me here I love is this reminds me of a happy wedding dance song. This reminds me of a everybody get up during a wedding song. So I like that contrast here. I thought that's where you were going with tradition, but two, I have Tammy Wynette in my notes on this because I heard Tammy Wynette here. I love the way her voice rolls on this song. This is we're back upbeat from the second track, and we got some really steady, awesome guitar picking or sitar picking here throughout. Dobro, if you must. But it really it sings well. It's a cool contrast of this happy, beautiful sound over top of this story of it ain't all it's cracked up to be, and I dig it.
Yeah, very neat song here, The Wedding Cake. And but we're gonna go a bit farther into heartbreak with Tender Leaves of Love, which is a straight breakup tune. I mean, she sounds great on the song once again. We hear those vocals. What a voice she's got. I don't think this song really brings a lot new to the table musically. It's not a really unique story like we got with the previous two songs. It's just all right for me.
Yeah, this is the point of the album, no spoilers, where I get to like, oh man, okay, we're on a cookie cutter album from the late 60s, and here we go. This sounds, it's her voice sounds great. I'm gonna say that a bunch, but this just sounds like that song they wanted you to put on here, and I it immediately takes me out. It makes me think of the Dewey Cox where he's singing "That's Amore," and they're like, "What is this? This is the kind of filler stuff." And no disrespect to Miss Linda Martell on this, but this is that cookie cutter machine stuff that they just make her sing on this, and it doesn't resonate the way the rest of the album has so far.
No, let's be clear. If we going forward, the machine shortcomings are not Linda Martell's fault. They are
Oh yeah.
the machine having her record an album in 12 hours. And
Oh, yeah.
I highly doubt that she picked any of these songs because that's just how things were being done. Um, I don't like that at all, but I feel like this is the first example where that kind of fatigue comes through. But we end our first side of the album with I Almost Called Your Name. Margaret Lewis, one of the writers, was the first to record this song. This is an I Still Love You kind of song, another old country trope. Really short song, not subtle at all in its production. I think this has got too much going on musically. But I think also some of that's to compensate for the fact that the song just, again, it's kind of this cookie cutter country tune. It's nothing really unique. So we got to put all these tricks on it to make it sound cooler. And yeah, that's really all it is. It's just a lot of overcompensation going on this song.
Yeah, maybe it's the old musician in me. When I'm looking back to albums from this era, and I know everybody's in the room playing it, I get a kick out of all of those. So for me, as far as the cookie cutter ones, this is one of my favorites musically, just because I can picture a bunch of session players in there getting it done. It has a cool, the musicality of it is cool, where I'm 100% with you. It lacks in every other department. I mean, this almost could have just been no vocals. And again, not taking it away from Linda Martell, but it's the way the song's set up. Anybody could sing this song. It's one of those cookie cutter jams here. It does end the side off cool, though. I dig it. It has a different feeling than a lot of the sounds we hear on the first half. So it ends me wanting to flip over. I will give it that.
Yes, and we flip it over to the big hit, Color Him Father. This was her debut single, but it was not first recorded by her. It was written by Richard Louis Spencer and recorded by the Winstons, and it was a top 10 pop hit. So she was doing this when it was still a contemporary song, which happened pretty often back then, we've actually seen. But kind of a bold choice in a way to make this the lead single since it was already so well known by the Winstons. And it's a song about where the narrator loves their stepfather, so they're going to color him father. And what really ties this song to its era is the mention of the narrator's dad dying in war and leaving mom with 7 kids. That was a part of why the song resonated because this we are in the Vietnam era at this point in our history, and that hadn't changed from 1969 to 1970. So it worked as a country song, and I can see why it did. I can see why it did some business for her. I do feel like the soul it does allow her to bring out the natural soulfulness in her vocals in a way that some of these more cookie cutter country songs haven't really allowed her to do. It's just a stronger composition. And at first she sang it like the Winstons, but they said, no, you need to do it like you. I don't want the Winstons. And that ended up working for her. This reached 22 on the country chart, and I can see why it was a hit.
Yeah, me too. I can also see why it opened the second side. Aside from it being the single here, it is a super upbeat breath of fresh air. It takes me to Tom Jones. It's not unusual in a wild way musically too, but it's just because the song is written so well. It's a really, really well done song, and recorded here, it's really well done in the fact of being in a different genre and a different take. It's a cool cover. I'm glad they did it. This is one of my jams on this album. It rolls correctly, and I'm a sucker for a nice fan brush snare here, and it keeps it rolling along, and I dig that.
Yes. So Color Him Father, a well-deserved hit. And we're going to follow it up with our factory songwriters from side one returning for There Never Was a Time. This was actually first recorded by the aforementioned Jeannie C. Riley. So, okay, I don't know if she knew that or not. I'm not sure she would have been thrilled about that, but that's what happened. But also of note, it was recorded by none other than one of our favorites here at Turntables and Tea, Dolly Parton, recorded it with her duet partner Porter Wagoner in 1969. Um, and this is a very family kind of story song about how there was always love in the family. There never was a time, despite what we may not have had. And I mentioned that Dolly did the song for a reason because this song came after, but the gold standard of this kind of song was done by none other than Dolly Parton with her classic Coat of Many Colors. And just what a beautiful, poignant song about growing up in poverty, but still having all that love. But Dolly had a personal narrative that made the song elevate to something great and transcendent. This is cookie cutter factory garbage in comparison to Dolly, especially. It's again, it's just a boring song. And just a year later, we got a much better song in this same narrative that actually hits. So I'm a bit more frustrated with how cookie cutter this is because of the Dolly connection, knowing that she did the song too and improved upon it in every way.
Yeah, for me, the Dolly connection wasn't there to take away from it, but what was the improper production on this song. The musicality of the song is so weird that it had me rewinding it, but rewinding it in a bad sense of like, why are they choosing the way they're going about this? It catches its stride, so to speak, but not until like a minute 42 in, and it's only a 2 minute and 52-second song. It doesn't work at all. It's for me, it's really the first full misstep of this album, and the fact of it just feels out of place and it just feels wrong. It feels wrong on this album.
Oh,
And
I
not
agree.
even, yeah, and not even because of the narrative, but for me on this one, it's just the musicality of it. It's poor.
Yeah, and it's oddly placed, frankly, too, considering the
Agreed.
songs. And that's another issue with this assembly line method of making albums. Like, well, we're gonna do it all in one session and maybe not at all times put that much thought into how these songs flow into one another, because this makes no sense after Color Him Father. And it makes no sense before the next song, which is You're Crying Boy Crying. This was written by Fred Birch, and this is a sassy breakup tune. This lady is fed up. And of all the songs on this album, I think this is the one with the most personality by far. I'm really getting a sense of the vocalist that Linda Martell is. And this is a really easy highlight for me. This was the final single from the album and it failed to chart. I'm going to guess that was because she was blackballed from the industry. And in addition to that, just being all messed up on its own, this should have been a hit. I think this is a great country song.
It is a great country song. For me, she the way it's produced, I maybe it's the remaster, but for me, she can't get in front of this band on this one. And these guys are playing crazy. It's she's really overshadowed, in my opinion, by the composition here. But as far as you put it together and all the pieces are in the right place, this song is through the roof. I dig it. It is a weird, for me, the weird placement is this. If I got to go silver lining, it's a there never was a time was a springboard for this song because you don't see this coming for a mile away. We turn the tempo up all the way and we get down on a super upbeat song here, and it's just a weird placement, man, but a good song. I dig the song. I wish that she was more prominent on this. I definitely feel you on the fact of she has feeling, but she gets overshadowed by the players on this one for me.
I can see where you're coming from. I think that's more of an issue on another song in particular that we're going to get to, but we're not there yet. First, we've got to do Old Leather Song. Uh, this is kind of like a twist on the Emma's for the many things she gave me kind of formula. And it just goes with that. Yeah, this is one I feel like these factory writers think this song is more clever than it actually is. It's not clever at all. It's just more factory bullshit. Uh, pardon my French there. That's what it is. Just and nothing new is added to this album. I don't feel like we're discussing a topic that hasn't been discussed or exploring a new sound. This is my least favorite song on the album. I don't care for this at all.
This song for me is way too long. It does. I like that. It does think it's too slick, and it's not. And it's weird all the way around. It's if you can relate to it, that's cool. But right here in this album, the way it's set out is just it feels false, and it is so it I say so long. It's not the longest song on this album, but it is a long, long listen. For me, it just drags on and on. I'm with you. It is definitely gun to the head. Not even gun to the head. It's just my least favorite song on this album by far.
Yep. But the good news is it's only up from here. And now we're at the penultimate song on the album, which is Then I'll Be Over You, the second Ben Peters composition here. Um, yeah, a melancholy breakup tune. That uh, we're going to mention her again. I definitely think there was one Tammy Wynette being thought of when this song was written. She never recorded it, but I think this is Linda Martell doing her best Tammy Wynette impression, and great voice, but she's not that kind of singer at all. And I mean, she conveys the emotion well enough, but I think this is a poor match of song to artist. And it's a very short song. It's under 2 minutes, so doesn't even make much of an impression and doesn't give her enough time to even try and make it her own.
Yeah, it falters for where it's at. It falters for a mismatch. I'm with you of music and artist. It doesn't sound like her on any other part of this album. I'm convinced that this was stuck in there because they had it done and it was less than 2 minutes. As almost an afterthought here. You could have gone 5 and 5 as far as tracks on both sides of the album, in my opinion, and been okay. But this one, it just it feels forced. It feels super forced inside of the way she is on top of the composition. I'm gonna go a little bit harder than you and say I don't really feel her go at it at all on this one. It really feels like almost you said bad matchup. I keep going back in my head like a bad karaoke pick. Someone that can kill it, and they just get stuck with a song that unfortunately they don't work well on. And that's the case for me with her on this one.
Yes. But now we're at the end of the album, and I think after these previous two, again, only up from here. And this song, not in this form, but it's the most famous song on the album. It's called Before the Next Teardrop Falls. This was written by Ben Peters with Vivian Keith. And this is an unrequited love song. Like, I'll be there before the next teardrop falls if you're unhappy in your relationship because I love you even though you're not with me. That's point of the song, another classic trope. This is the song that for me the band overpowers her on. I think this is overproduced. I think she sings the song well, but again, there's just it's too busy musically for me, this rendition. But other people disagree with me. This was the second single and the top 40 country hit.
Yeah, I got to disagree with you on it too, only in the fact of that it's an ender. This is our final song, so I feel like everybody is bringing it all the way. So to speak on this one, I don't feel that she gets overshadowed. I really like what she does here. I think this is a great track as far as ending the album. I think it works out well, but I think in a vinyl sense, something we don't get to talk about as much all the time, in a vinyl sense, this one has me flipping back over. It works well here. It has me keeping the vibe going, and I dig that. she does a great job here. This is like top three of songs for me on this album.
I can see where you would say that. It's a really strong song in and of itself, and that's a part of why it's so famous. But yeah, the most famous version did come in 1975 when Freddie Fender recorded it and took it to the top of the pop charts. It was one of the top hits that year. And yeah, I did listen to his version, not to take away from this version, but that one's that there's a reason that one topped the charts. That one more understated in its production, part of it sung in Spanish. It's definitive for this song, but the seeds of why it became a hit are definitely present in this recording of it.
Yeah, I think there's seeds of what came in really classic rock or what we call classic rock, but southern rock here. I hear a little bit of Creedence Clearwater in this, as far
I'm
as
sure
the
that
way
was
that,
an influence.
yeah, the instrumentation here. So I dig it on that note as well, where we're leaving the album on a thought of what's to come, hopefully.
Yes, what would have been to come because this is the only album, sadly.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot here that really wish makes me wish there were more albums from her. She's got a great voice, and with the right kind of songs, she really does sell it. And I just wonder what she could have done with a bit more control over the material she was doing. I do find myself asking that after listening to this album, but this is what we have. It is groundbreaking. Cory, what's your grade for the album?
Oh, here we go. Color Me Country, Miss Linda Martell. Um, I've used the term naive a bunch here and what I feel and the way I was going at it, but what I'm not naive about is the way that these albums were put together back then and the way that a lot of this music was told to the artist to be played or recorded by other artists and how quick it was done. That being said, it falls short in the fact of being a full album for me. There's a lot of open spots here, and a lot of that is equated, in my criticism, to the way that these albums were recorded. The moments that we get with her are really awesome. The moments that she shines through the music that was handed to her are really great. But unfortunately, there's a lot of holes on this album for me as far as a final product. My final grade for this one is going to be a C plus.
For the same reasons as you, I'm gonna give it a C plus as well. And I think the plus is more so for the history behind it for me.
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate a groundbreaking work. This is definitely that, but yeah, there's a lot of issues with how these albums were recorded back at this point in time. And I think that was especially true of Nashville, even more so than other sectors. And yeah, there's a lot, there's so much potential here that's not fully realized just on this one album. But
Yeah.
the good stuff is good and definitely worth checking out.
Yeah.
What's your favorite tune here?
I'm going Color and Father. I know it's not her tune, but I really like the way she does it. Um, yeah, that's the one for me.
I gotta go with Your Crying Boy Crying. I like a sassy song. What can I say? Well, there we have it, folks. Our country deep dive, classic country deep dive. We haven't done that yet.
No,
Uh,
not at all. Hopefully, everybody else is doing it with us because that's the silver lining here. We get to hear stuff that we never
yeah.
would have heard
Yeah, I mean, I
anywhere
know
else.
her streams went way, way up because of Beyonce. I do know that. So that is
Good.
a good outcome of all of this.
Yeah,
But
that's all we can ask from art, that it inspires other art and that it keeps people finding new art.
most definitely. But now, as awesome as Cowboy Carter is, we do have another new release that we're getting into this month. But in the lead up to it, we're gonna do something from one of that artist's collaborators, and I'll have Cory introduce this one because I know it's near and dear to your heart, the album that we'll be doing next.
It is indeed. So the next one we're going to do is by a beautiful voice, another beautiful voice, one that I've seen a few times live, but always sang out to me. And her ensemble here, we're going to go with Florence and the Machine Lungs.
All right, and late 2000s, early 2010s staple of alternative music.
True.
So it'll be fun to look at this one, I think. This was a big one when I was in middle school. So it'll be nice to listen to it all this time later.
Yeah, man. They get down. She gets down. They get down. I'm excited about this one.
She's got a heck of a voice. I definitely know that. We did discuss her a little bit on our Joanne episode that was so long ago now, but she did make an appearance on that album. But now we're going to be hearing Florence in her element. So very exciting. To stay tuned for that, please follow us on social media. Links are in the description below. And also subscribe and rate us wherever you're listening to. That would be much appreciated. And just keep in mind that the dog days are not over until you listen to our next episode. So keep your lungs clear until then and take care of yourself.
Peace.